So in this video, I want to talk about a particular scene that was cut in this episode that just came up that I feel like is quite important. And it's one of those where it's Rudy starting to confide in other people about his issues downstairs, his ED, his erectile dysfunction. And it being cut itself is disappointing because it is a scene that I do feel is important, and I do feel like it could have been added in the episode because it isn't a very long scene. It's very quick. It's about, I would say, maybe at most 10 to 15 seconds of just explaining the basics of how Rudy felt and with that scene. So basically, to summarize, Rudy goes into the classroom at the end of the episode that just recently happened, and he's basically having a conversation with the Beast Girls, particularly one of them getting a little bit toey at the fact that Cliff and Elinalise are getting very, very chummy. They're all getting cozy, they're a nice little happy couple now, and of course a particular cat girl is not happy about it. She's a little bit on edge about it, and then she mentions to Rudy about, hey, why don't we hook up? And it's kind of seen as like a passing remark. It's a little bit of a jab, like a little bit of fun, like, yeah, you know, why don't we hook up and we can show them? And Rudy then brings up the notion about his ED, his erectile dysfunction, and saying, well, I would do that if I was able to. I'm kind of paraphrasing because I don't remember how exactly the scene plays out, but you get the general gist. He basically brings it up and saying, hey, basically, if that could cure, then I would be able to. And it kind of dampens the mood in the room. They kind of look at him a little bit sympathetically. Even Cliff kind of looks at him, even Elinalise, and they all kind of have a bit of sympathy. And as much as it's not a scene that has to be in the episode, it's not like it breaks the entire story. You could have it as a passing remark in the next episode, them knowing about it. It's something like that. But to me, I feel like it is kind of important in Rudy's growth in being able to confide in other people in that room and being like, hey, I have these issues, and he's trying to overcome them. But it shows a level of trust with the other Beast Girls. As much as they're described as delinquents in the light novels, and they are kind of a little bit special in the head, especially with their bully tactics and everything, they're not bad kids or bad people. They're just a little bit too sure of themselves. They've gotten very comfortable in that school life. They are princesses of the Beast Tribe, so they've allowed their positions to get to their heads, and being brought down a peg or two has definitely reminded them of who they are. And the interactions between Rudy and them is always seen as a bit of comedicness, even though Rudy does do some inappropriate things from time to time that he probably shouldn't be doing, which is rather funny because I mentioned it in my previous video about Rudy probably not doing some of the things that he's doing. What he's doing is inappropriate, and the girl's response, scratching him in the face, is very much warranted, which is funny because I've seen some people sit in the comment section saying, I don't criticize Rudy for his actions, which is far from that. I do criticize Rudy for his actions. I just don't need to note on the exact same thing every episode. But apparently some people just have reading and listening issues and want me to repeat the same sentence every video. So I'll just repeat it this one other time that yes, I think Rudy does sometimes overstep his boundaries with the girls, but the girls are more than capable of throwing a couple of claws at his face and reminding him of his position. So it is what it is. But I just feel like that's one of the scenes that I do feel like is important in allowing Rudy to make one step forward in him confiding with other people. I did mention in the other video about some of the minor scenes, particularly with Cliff and the bullies. I wouldn't really call them bullies. It was more Cliff confronting them about Elinalise and the rumors going around, not realizing that the rumors were true, that Elinalise was sleeping around quite a lot with all the students, the male students, and Cliff taking that as offense on himself, or taking it upon himself to take offense to it, and then trying to call them out, and they just basically gave him a smackdown. I remember in the light novel just being it between two students and him, and Rudy stepping in and then being kind of afraid of Rudy's power and them stepping away, but then also kind of reminding Rudy, hey, you know, he's the one that kind of instigated this in an aggressive way. But Cliff, being who he is, he's a bit of a special one. But another thing to also note, and this isn't so much cut content, but more just explaining, I guess, some of maybe the subtle details. You could argue this is cut content, but you could also argue that it's not cut content. But I feel it's important that one of the reasons why Cliff was very rough around the edges towards Rudy is because of the OVA episode with Eris, where Eris and Cliff met for the first time, and Cliff fell head over heels for Eris. There's a couple of things I want to talk about after that, some complaints I've seen about Cliff, but to start with, he fell head over heels, but Eris was very much more interested in Rudy, and that's all she ever spoke about, was how amazing Rudy was, how Rudy did this, how Rudy did that, and it rubbed Cliff the wrong way, because of course he was in love with Eris, and he didn't like someone basically just buffing up this other person to the ends of the earth. And so Cliff kind of wondered if a lot of these accomplishments that Rudy achieved were just over-exaggerated, made up, just seemed outlandish. So when Rudy enters the academy, Cliff is very skeptical of Rudy, but as time goes on, as you've noticed in these episodes, Cliff has warmed up to Rudy, realizing that, hey, Rudy isn't that bad of a person. Cliff's also fell in love with someone else now, and that's one of the comments that I've seen, is people being like, oh, clearly Cliff fell head over heels over Eris. Well, that clearly was false, because he just fell so easily in love with Elinalise. But you gotta remember, there's a big time lapse between when he fell in love with Eris and then when he fell in love with Elinalise. There's like multiple years. As Cliff does note in the light novels, he got over it. He moved on. And you've had plenty of time. And I kind of find it weird that some individuals in the anime community are sitting there saying, well, how dare Cliff move on after several years of falling in love with Eris? Yes, he fell head over heels. He's a little bit too gushy, too quick to fall in love over just the appearance of Eris straight away. And I don't think it's just physical appearance. I also think it was just the way she kind of rolled in as almost like that hero, full of energy, vibrance. It kind of took Cliff, you know, I would say overwhelmed him a little bit. And so, yeah, he fell head over heels. But that doesn't mean that his feelings weren't genuine because he moved on after several years and then fell in love with Elinalise. Whether you like the fact of how he falls in love, that's fine to question if you think it's too quick. But to sit there and say that it wasn't genuine because he moved on after years of being separated from Eris, that just seems a little bit... I feel like you're grabbing too many weak arguments there and trying to yank on them a little bit too hard. It's been some time. You would hope by then Cliff would have moved on, but still he was a little bit prickly around Rudy because of what he had heard. He kind of sat there and was a bit more skeptical about all of these accomplishments that Rudy had, and maybe had wondered, hey, were these all true? But quickly discovered that, hey, Rudy does live up to his name. He's got some great accomplishments, and so Cliff warmed up a little bit, and then with the establishment of Elinalise and Rudy helping with that, well, that's the way Cliff sees it. But I mean, at the end of the day, Rudy got him in the front door and said, hey, make your confession and see how things go. Cliff has no reason to dislike Rudy at that point. So those are the parts of the content that have been kind of pruned out, and also explaining some more context to Cliff's relationship with Eris, and then of course Rudy, and just kind of giving my own thoughts and opinions on Cliff falling head over heels over Rudy, which I don't think is an issue. I can understand some people feeling like he falls too easily in love, but that isn't an uncommon thing or trope amongst other individuals, male and female. There are many people out there that fall in love very quickly based on little subtle details, and it's not just physical appearance but also just the energy that can come off that person, the way they kind of show themselves, the smile, the way they walk, the elegantness, the way they dress themselves. All those kind of little details do matter. Even hygiene. I know that seems insane, but hey, hygiene is something that some people take into account and could add. I mean, if you go up to someone that you really like and they smell, not exactly a great thing. So I feel like I'm giving basic tutorial understandings of how love works, which I guess maybe some people kind of have different ways of falling in love. So again, I hope you understand that. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Of course, if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.